Well, folks, Senate Republicans have made it their mission to expand the Senate majority that they have right now. And that goes directly through the state of Michigan in 2026, where incumbent Senator Gary Peters announced just a few months ago that he will not be running for re-election in 2026, leaving this seat open for a true fight in this election. But the real question is, can Republicans win this seat? So we're going to jump into, look at all the possibilities we have here. But before we do, drop down below, hit that subscribe button, and don't miss another video from us again in the future. So as we all know, two-term incumbent Senator Gary Peters, initially elected back in 2014 by a relatively healthy margin, was elected by almost 13 percentage points back in 2014, when we know was a very good year for Republicans. This was the year the Republicans took the Senate. They took the House of Representatives. And really, they were a stopgap on President Obama's final 2 years in office. As we know, the Senate, through Mitch McConnell, held open the Supreme Court vacant seat for over a year until President Trump was elected and eventually nominated Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch to fill the place of Antonin Scalia. But Gary Peters, like we said, is not running. Back in 2020, he did run for his first re-election, barely won the election by about 90,000 votes over Republican Congressman John James. Now, and James is looking to jump in the race for the governor's mansion in 26. His name has been floated out there on the Republican side. But ultimately, right now, there was a recent poll that had just come out. Gosh. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, here we go. Recent poll came out that shows that he's leading 31% to, well, Tudor Dixon's not too far behind, but they're both at about 30% in the governor's race in the primary. Now, granted, on the Republican primary, Mike Rogers most likely, he ran in 24, lost by about 19,000 votes to Alyssa Slotkin. 19,000 votes yet to Alyssa Slotkin. And is really looking to make a redemption on what happened in 2024. And we know that Michigan, federally, I should say it's a very nuanced state. Federally, it is a swing state. It voted for President Trump in 2016, it voted for President Biden in 2020, and then voted again for President Trump in 2024. So it's a very much a definition of a swing state. But let's look at the Michigan. I believe the Republicans hold the House of Representatives there, and the Democrats control the Senate. So let's see. Okay, so the Democrats have a majority in the Senate by 2 seats. The Republicans hold a majority in the House of Representatives by 6 seats right now. Obviously, we also have a very, very liberal governor in Gretchen Whitmer, who is who is not able to run for re-election. She is term limited, and announced that she is not jumping in this race on the Democrat side, or she's not jumping in to run for Senate, which obviously means she is looking to run for president in 2028. Just like Pete Buttigieg, he's a carpetbagger, just recently moved to Michigan, decided he's not going to run, even though he was probably the best shot that the Democrats had I shouldn't say the best shot. He would have been able to fundraise a lot of money. The Midwest states are weird when people come from other states and then run for Minnesota, Michigan, Wisconsin, it just doesn't go good. Even Pennsylvania, look at what happened with Mehmet Oz back in 2022. It's like it's just the reality of these people. They're looking for people that are from the state they're in, or even just Minnesota, Wisconsin, but you still want someone from Minnesota. But ultimately, getting back on it, Democrats are poised to jump in this race. They really need to hold on to this seat. Senate Democrats have a very, very tough race coming up here. Very, very tough, with very limited pickup opportunities, very limited opportunities to go on the offensive, and are really stuck on the defensive in many states like Michigan, like Georgia, like New Hampshire, like Minnesota. The Democrats are they're on the defensive, and there's really not much they can do. It's just how the map's laid out right now. And like we said, with Gary Peters retiring, John Ossoff, who is the most vulnerable Senate Democrat up for re-election in 2026, and then Shaheen Shaheen from New Hampshire, who just recently announced that she's not running for re-election, makes it pretty tough for the Democrats. Really, where do they have to go on the offensive? North Carolina and Maine, that's about it. And good luck. Maine, that's going to be a tough one for them. Susan Collins is very, very popular there. But let's look on the Democrat side. Who could jump in this race here? There's been a number. The current Attorney General, his name has been thrown out there. She has shown some interest in it. Sarah Anthony, who's a state senator. Haley Stevens, who's the U.S. representative from Michigan's 11th congressional district. She is considered a front runner, or like the number 2 behind. Pete Buttigieg was initially expected to jump in this race, and then he decided he's not going to because he's going to run for president in 2028. He didn't announce that, but we all know why he's doing it. So she was I think she worked in the Obama administration, worked on Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama's presidential campaign, and then she joined the Presidential Task Force on the Auto Industry and was hired as the chief of staff for the secretary that oversaw that. And then she worked for the Digital Manufacturing and Design Innovation Institute in Chicago, returned in 2017, ran for Congress in a very, very liberal area. There was, I believe she beat initially an incumbent Republican. I could be wrong on that. I could be thinking of someone else. But represents a very liberal part of the state. And let's take a look. Who else we could look at? The current state senator, very radical, pro-abortion. Mallory McMorrow, state senator. This lady's pretty nuts. Let's just put it that way. You can look at her campaign website, and we won't pull it up right now, but this lady is extremely, extremely pro-abortion, anti-individual rights. She's very much a big government, really, you could say, product of the education system. You wonder why we want to dismantle the Department of Education is because of the horrid results that we have seen since the Department of Education was instituted under President Jimmy Carter. We dropped from like number 1 in educational rankings to like number 40. Obviously, something is not working with a top-down approach where we're trying to push down curriculum from the top down. We need more homogenous curriculum that is more relevant to the individual school district, to the individual school, to the individual state. That's the reality. Because, you talk about, maybe you're talking about a child who's learning about the Civil War. Well, you're going to be taught very differently if you're in Georgia learning about the Civil War than you are if you're in Minnesota, just because of the cultural differences that are there. But to have a wide range of a diverse spectrum of opinions and ideas in teachings when it comes to that is absolutely critical and necessary, and having a one-shoe-fits-all policy from the federal government is not the way to go. We need to have school districts and school curriculums need to be managed at the state level. They need to be managed at the lowest level. I am okay with government regulation at the lowest level when we're talking about, city ordinances. Stuff from even the state sometimes can feel too far because you're talking about, one policy that's going to affect people in downtown Minneapolis, but are also going to affect people in Hibbing, Minnesota, or Bemidji, Minnesota. It's like the one size fits all policy is not the best. We need to give more rights back to the states to control their education, their curriculum, everything. But on the Republican side, who do we have? Now, I'll point out a couple people who didn't jump in. Gretchen Whitmer, Pete Buttigieg, Gary Peters isn't in. Someone who I think would be great if they ran her, Rashida Tlaib. Let's run the most pro-Hamas terrorist sympathizer that there is in Congress for this seat. Please do that, Democrats. Please nominate Rashida Tlaib. I would love to hear her try and defend her positions on why she has almost stopped short of calling for the complete and total destruction of the state of Israel. Why she has supported pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist sympathizers. Why is that? Why is it that the Democrat Party is so keen? They don't really care about the individual issues of people. They just care about protecting Hamas sympathizers and people who promote Hamas propaganda, like that Muhammad Khalid, who they're trying to get the hell out of this country because he was here on a visa. And he comes here for basically the sole purpose of creating disruption and promoting Hamas propaganda in the United States. I'd love to see Rashida Tlaib try and defend that. You might as well just hand the seat to the Republicans at that point. Please do it. But let's take a look at the polling right now. So some of this, it will be a little outdated because ultimately, Pete Buttigieg and Gretchen Whitmer aren't in this. So we need to see what it would look like without Buttigieg, without Gretchen Whitmer in this poll. And so obviously not a lot you're going to get from here. On the Republican side, obviously Mike Rogers ran for Senate in 2024 against Elissa Slotkin, lost by about 19,000 votes. He was your typical establishment Republican who's going to run in one of these Midwest states. He's not your Tommy Tuberville or your who's the Tom Cotton from Arkansas. That's not the guy you're going to get from one of these Midwest states. Like, we're lucky that we get Johnson. What's his name? The Wisconsin senator. What's his name? Ron Johnson. It's like, we're lucky we get him from Michigan. Let's just put it that way. Some other people who have looked at jumping in this race, and Tudor Dixon is really considering it. Obviously, she is a media personality. She is this daughter of, who her dad owned a big company that she ended up working for. Let's see. She was an executive at Michigan Steel. It was a steel company her father had founded, but was a media personality. She ran for governor in 2022. Unfortunately, got smoked in 2022 by like 10 points. It's weird. Gretchen Whitmer is very, very liberal, but somehow she was very popular in Michigan. Very, very weird. Like I said, Michigan is a very nuanced state. But here's the reality. There's a couple people who could jump in this race who I'd be okay with. Tudor Dixon or Mike Rogers. As of right now, I'm probably leaning Mike Rogers 60-40 over Tudor Dixon. But also because I think John James is going to jump in the governor's race. Or Tudor Dixon might jump in the governor's race. I think Mike Rogers, he's going to run. There's no doubt. But who do we want to stay the hell away from this seat? Ronna McDaniel. No, you did a terrible job as the head of the RNC. We don't want you in Michigan. We don't want you. And as of right now, Mike Rogers has got the endorsement of Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House from Georgia. Now, the hypothetical polling right now, this was taken about a month ago, shows Tudor Dixon with about a 4-point advantage over Mike Rogers with about a quarter of all voters undecided. Taking a look at other polling that we have here for this race. Let's go Michigan. Let's do the Republican primary. Okay. That is for the governor's race. Let's look at the Senate race. If we did, and see, this is the thing. So if we did Rogers versus Stevens, so Haley Stevens is the nominee and Mike Rogers is the nominee. Right now, Rogers is up by 6 points. Obviously, we don't have a lot of polling for general election right now, but I think Mike Rogers is a very strong candidate. Elissa Slotkin was just a strong Democrat candidate, too, who was well-funded. Mike Rogers, I truly believe, could be a very good senator from Michigan. If he were to get in, I think he would be kind of like what Ron DeSantis did. He won by 30,000 votes, did such a great job his first 4 years. He won by 1.5 million votes the second time. I don't think it's going to be that drastic, but you could go from winning by a point with Mike Rogers to winning by 4, 5, 6 points. Kind of like, I guess, also with Gretchen Whitmer, you could say that is the same. But here's the big thing. Democrats have a lot of weaknesses going into this race. And here is what could make things very weak for the Democrats is if Trump has a successful 2 years, it could make it very hard for Democrats in 26. Trump won the state in 2024, and it wasn't even the closest state, I don't think. He won it by like 80,000 votes. Now, granted, Trump will not be on the ballot, so the Republican Party is going to need to adjust and figure out how can they win without Trump on the ballot. And then you talk about the manufacturing base. There's almost 600,000 manufacturing jobs in Michigan. That is something, that working class base in Michigan is something that Mike Rogers and the Republicans are much, much more favorable with. That's something that he can definitely lean in. But if you look on the GOP side, what are their weaknesses? Policy execution on the Trump administration. If Trump can't get his domestic spending agenda in place here soon, pass through Congress, it could be tough. Like we said, that domestic agenda needs to be enacted through the appropriations bill quickly. Because if we get it in, the quicker we get it in, the more time there is to reap the economic benefits that are going to come from it. When you talk about tariffs, the proper use of tariffs to lower American tariffs on American products, or even to the national security on certain industries, which could be the manufacturing base. But ultimately, I don't think we should be propping up our manufacturing base using tariffs. I think there should be some selective tariffs that we use to insulate ourselves so we're not reliant on China. Totally agree there for national security reasons. But if we're just going to use insulate our manufacturing industry, I don't think that's going to be beneficial. But using tariffs to lower other tariffs, reciprocal tariffs, let's get the tariffs down to nothing. And then, like we said, a strong candidate that is well funded by the National Republican Senatorial Committee, who can also fundraise a lot on their own and can put their own money in. Mike Rogers, that's your guy right there. And Democrats, and this really could be like the number 2 thing on what could affect this race. If Democrats keep doubling down on the worst of the policies that their party espouses, they could very much hurt Democrats in Michigan. They keep espousing their views when it comes to transgenders. Alyssa Slotkin, she voted against that. She voted against keeping mentally ill men out of women's sports. She voted against keeping mentally ill men out of women's locker rooms and bathrooms in public schools. And so if the Democrats keep doubling down on the worst of their policies, and you even see now, they're ready to throw Chuck Schumer for making a good political decision. They're ready to throw him under the bus in favor of AOC. Like there was an Atlas poll that just came out, and I'll get it pulled up here. An Atlas poll that came out, a couple days ago. And it has the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life on here. Outside of Barack and Michelle Obama, the Democrat with the highest favorability rating in this poll is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. AOC, what the F-U-C-K? Are you serious? This is how you know the Democrats are in a bus. They've put their pedal to the metal, and they're going to just drive off a cliff. Like if AOC is really the most favorable Democrat, Democrats have a lot bigger issues coming for them. So we're going to see, do they keep doubling down on the worst of their policies? Like they could be attacking Trump on his use of tariffs outside of leverage with other countries. Trump wants to use tariffs as an economic tool, not as a economic tool to reduce tariffs and eventually, at least this is what, he kind of gives conflicting information, but you look at what's happened with the market, with the Dow Jones, with the S&P 500. The market obviously believes that Trump views tariffs and wants to use tariffs as economic tools, as actual economic policy, not a tool to get tariffs to come down that other countries have put on us. So we're going to see what happens. If the Democrats keep doubling down on the worst of their policies, they could be in for a big shellacking. But we're going to see what happens in Michigan. But so let me know, who do you think would be the best candidate for the GOP in 26 in Michigan? Let me know down below. That's going to wrap things up for today. Drop down below, hit that subscribe button, and we will catch you next time, folks.